Patrick Hale was 39 years old, and most days of his life passed in the same quiet rhythm. He lived alone in a small wooden cabin at the forest's edge, a place he had built with his own hands years ago when he decided the world had become a little too loud for him. Silence didn't bother Patrick. If anything, it kept him steady. He worked as a part-time carpenter, taking small repair jobs for people in the nearby town. Enough to keep his bills paid and his days simple. Most evenings, he sat on the front steps of his cabin with a cup of hot tea, watching the tree line fade into dusk. The forest had always been his companion. He knew its sounds, its moods, its patterns. He could tell when a deer passed through long before he saw it. He could guess a storm's arrival by the way the wind curled around the treetops. Nothing in the woods surprised him anymore, but in the last few days, something had shifted. The forest had grown unusually still. No birds in the morning. No rustling in the underbrush. Even the creek behind his cabin sounded quieter, as if the whole place was holding its breath. Patrick noticed it right away, and every time he stepped outside, he felt that same strange tension hang in the air. He couldn't explain it, but he knew the woods well enough to understand one thing clearly: the silence meant something. He just didn't know what yet. That morning, as he picked up his worn gloves and prepared to collect firewood, Patrick had no idea that the quiet around him was only the beginning, and that before the day ended, his life would change in a way he never could have imagined. Patrick walked slowly along the narrow trail that led to the creek behind his cabin. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. His boots pressed into the soft soil, and each step felt heavier than usual, weighed down by the strange silence that had settled over the forest. Normally, birds would be singing, squirrels chattering, but today, nothing. Just the occasional rustle of leaves far ahead, and his own steady breath. Then he heard it, a sound so faint that at first, he thought he might be imagining it. A weak, trembling cry, unlike anything he had heard before. It wasn't human. It wasn't the call of any animal he knew. It came from deeper in the underbrush, near a cluster of fallen trees. Patrick's heart quickened. Something was in trouble. He moved cautiously, every sense alert. The cry repeated, softer this time, a fragile, desperate whimper. Patrick followed it slowly, ducking under low branches, stepping over mossy roots. The sound led him to a small clearing beside the creek, where the sunlight dappled the forest floor through the trees. There, half hidden under a tangle of ferns, he saw a tiny figure, trembling and covered in dark, soft fur. Its eyes, wide and fearful, locked onto his. Patrick froze for a moment, unsure of what he was looking at. The creature's arm was bent at an odd angle, and a shallow cut streaked its small shoulder. It was clearly injured and weak. Patrick knelt down carefully, keeping his movements slow. "Easy now," he said softly, almost a whisper. "I'm not here to hurt you." He extended his hands, showing no threat. The little one hesitated, then let out another quiet whimper, shivering violently. Patrick's heart ached. Despite the strangeness of the creature, he felt an immediate, undeniable impulse to help, for the first time in days. Patrick felt the forest breathe around him again, as if it recognized that something fragile had been found. He knew in that moment that leaving it here wasn't an option. The choice was clear. Even if it was dangerous, he would take the baby back to his cabin and do everything he could to help. Patrick stood in the clearing, the small creature trembling in front of him. The forest around him was silent, almost too silent, and he felt the weight of the choice pressing on his chest. He knew that helping it could be dangerous. The Bigfoot's family, its pride, could be nearby, and no one could predict how they would react to a human intervening. Yet leaving the baby there, broken and alone, was unthinkable. He crouched lower, studying the fragile figure. The baby's breathing was shallow, its tiny chest rising and falling with effort. Its arm was bent awkwardly, and a faint streak of blood ran through the fur. Patrick's hands itched to act, to soothe it, to make it safe. Memories of his younger sister's children, of the helplessness of a baby in need, surfaced unexpectedly. He couldn't ignore it. He simply COULDN single quotes do. Patrick gently lifted the little one, cradling it against his chest. Its tiny body shivered against him, and he felt a strange warmth, a trust that seemed to pass silently between them. He wrapped the baby in his worn jacket, careful not to jostle the injured arm. Every step toward his cabin was measured, careful, slow. He knew the forest could hide danger, but in that moment, there was no hesitation. He only focused on the life in his arms. As he walked, Patrick whispered softly, "You'll be all right. I've got you now." The baby gave a small shaky sound, almost like a sigh of relief, and nestled closer. Patrick felt his own fear fade slightly, replaced by a quiet determination. The forest around him seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the bond forming in that fragile moment. He didn't know what awaited him at the cabin, or if the pride would appear. But one thing was certain. He had chosen compassion over fear. And sometimes he realized the bravest act was simply to care. Patrick carefully stepped into his cabin, closing the door behind him. The little Bigfoot in his arms shivered with every movement. He set it gently on an old blanket laid across the workbench, doing his best to make it comfortable. The baby's small eyes watched him nervously, glimmering with fear and trust all at once. Patrick took a deep breath, knowing that this was no ordinary night. What he held in his hands was something extraordinary and fragile. He filled a small basin with warm water and began cleaning the cut along the baby's arm. The creature flinched at first, but allowed him to work, its tiny fingers clutching at his shirt. Patrick spoke softly, murmuring reassurances, his voice steady and calm. He fashioned a simple splint from a piece of carved wood and some strips of cloth, careful not to hurt the delicate limb. Every movement was precise, deliberate, and slow, as if any sudden action might undo the fragile trust they had just begun to build. The baby clung to him briefly, nuzzling against his chest like a frightened child. Patrick felt a pang of emotion he hadn't experienced in years. There was no threat here, only a need for care and protection. His hands were rough and calloused from years of carpentry, but he worked with patience, letting the creature sense his steady presence. Then, from outside the cabin, he heard it, a faint crunch of leaves, heavy footsteps moving in the shadows. His chest tightened. Patrick froze, realizing the pride must be nearby. The protective instincts that had guided him so far now mixed with apprehension. The forest had grown so still that even the sounds of the creek seemed muted. Every moment felt suspended, as if the woods themselves were waiting to see what would happen next. Patrick didn't panic. He simply continued his work, keeping the baby calm and safe, whispering, "You're all right now. I won't let anything happen to you." And for a fleeting moment, the forest felt alive again, not with danger, but with hope. Morning came slowly, the sun slipping through the forest canopy in thin golden shafts. Patrick opened the cabin door cautiously, the baby still cradled in his arms. His eyes scanned the clearing beyond, and his breath caught. There, standing silently in a loose semicircle around the cabin, were 5 massive figures. Adult Bigfoots, larger than anything he had imagined, their dark fur blending with the shadows of the trees. They didn't move aggressively. They simply watched. Patrick's heart pounded. He had known the pride might be close, but seeing them, this close, this real, was something else entirely. Their eyes were focused, intelligent, and wary. Patrick could sense their awareness, the way each subtle movement of their bodies was deliberate. They were studying him, and more importantly, the baby he held. The baby whimpered softly, shifting against Patrick's chest. He raised it slightly, letting the figure see that it was unharmed and being cared for. One of the Bigfoots stepped forward, its posture tense but not threatening. The others remained still, circling slightly to maintain a protective stance around their territory and the one in his arms. Patrick's mind raced, but he kept his voice low and calm. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help," he said, almost instinctively, though he wasn't sure if they could understand. The largest figure, likely the leader, watched intently, its amber eyes studying Patrick with a depth that made him feel both exposed and understood. The forest around them remained quiet, the usual morning sounds absent, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Patrick felt a strange mix of awe and fear. These creatures were enormous and powerful, yet there was a calm dignity in their stance, a quiet intelligence that suggested this moment wasn't about aggression, but assessment. They were deciding whether he was friend or foe. He swallowed hard, holding the baby closer, and realized the truth. He was being judged, not attacked. The pride wasn't here to harm him. They were observing, protecting their own, and silently acknowledging that he had done something extraordinary. For a brief, suspended moment, the forest and its giants existed around him in complete stillness, and Patrick felt both fear and unexpected respect. ****. The largest Bigfoot, easily the leader of the group, stepped forward, moving with surprising quietness for its massive size. Patrick instinctively held the baby closer to his chest, but he didn't back away. The creature stopped just a few feet from him, its amber eyes locked on the small figure in Patrick's arms. Patrick could feel the weight of the gaze, not as a threat, but as a careful, deliberate evaluation. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, the leader lowered one massive hand and rested it lightly on Patrick's shoulder. The warmth and weight of the gesture sent a shiver through him. It was not threatening. It was something else entirely, something akin to gratitude, an acknowledgement of his intentions. Patrick's pulse raced, but he remained still, letting the silent communication pass between them. Another adult Bigfoot stepped closer, brushing a hand over the baby's small arm, inspecting the splint Patrick had fashioned. There was a careful gentleness in the touch, almost human in its precision. The baby stirred, making a quiet sound, and the creature did not pull away. Instead, it held the touch, as though confirming the care had been accepted. The other three adults formed a loose circle around them, their posture protective rather than aggressive. They shifted slightly, positioning themselves so that Patrick and the baby were completely surrounded, yet not threatened. The forest around them remained hushed, the rustle of leaves and distant birds replaced by the quiet hum of this unusual encounter. Patrick felt his breath catch. He had expected fear, aggression, maybe even an attack, but not this. This was trust. The leader's eyes, deep and intelligent, held a message he could not fully understand but somehow felt in his chest. It was simple. He had acted correctly. The baby was safe, and for that, he was acknowledged. A soft, low rumble escaped from the leader's throat. Patrick interpreted it as a sound of reassurance, almost like a voice saying, "You are accepted." The pride did not leave immediately. They lingered, watching, protective and silent. And in that extraordinary moment, Patrick realized that the forest wasn't just home to these giants. It was home to a family that understood care, kindness, and the fragile trust between them. He had crossed a line most humans never would. And yet, against every expectation, he was not attacked. He was honored. ***. The leader gave a subtle gesture, and Patrick understood. He was to follow. His heart pounded, but he kept the baby secure against his chest and stepped cautiously into the forest alongside the pride. Every footfall on the soft earth felt amplified in the quiet morning. The adult Bigfoots moved with deliberate calm, their massive forms weaving silently between the trees, guiding him deeper into a world he had only glimpsed before. Patrick's breath came slowly. intentionally, as he tried to take in the moment. The forest seemed to shift around them. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in scattered beams, touching patches of moss and ferns. Birds remained silent, and even the breeze felt careful, as if it too recognized the sacredness of the journey. He realized this was no ordinary walk. This was an invitation into their realm, a space where the normal rules of human and forest life did not apply. The baby nestled closer, occasionally making soft, trembling noises. Patrick whispered reassurance. "It's all right. We're almost there." The pride walked beside him, occasionally glancing toward him or the baby, ensuring safety without needing words. Patrick noticed how they navigated the terrain, over roots and fallen logs, with grace and purpose, as if they had been guarding this path for generations. He felt a strange peace settling over him. The fear he had carried since finding the baby was giving way to awe and deep respect. He understood that he was witnessing not just creatures, but a family protective, intelligent, and deeply aware of one another. Each step was quiet, deliberate, a silent rhythm that connected them all. As they moved further into the forest, Patrick's mind focused on nothing but the baby in his arms and the trust these creatures were granting him. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of belonging, small and fleeting, yet powerful. In that silence, he realized that connection, understanding, and respect could exist even between worlds that seemed impossible to bridge. This walk was more than a passage through the forest. It was a journey into the heart of trust. After walking for what felt like an eternity, Patrick and the pride arrived at a hidden clearing, almost entirely concealed by fallen trees, dense ferns, and thick moss. The sunlight barely reached the forest floor here, giving the place a quiet, protected glow. Patrick's breath caught. This was no ordinary den. It was a sanctuary, a carefully constructed home made of interwoven branches, moss, and soft leaves. The pride's presence here was unmistakable. Every detail of the clearing spoke of care, protection, and the rhythms of a family life unknown to humans. Patrick knelt carefully, holding the baby a little higher to show he had arrived safely. The mother emerged from the shadows, moving slowly but deliberately toward them. Her amber eyes were wide, a mixture of relief, fear, and love. She paused just a few feet away, watching Patrick intently. The baby trembled against his chest, but he spoke softly. "You're safe now. Nothing will happen." Patrick lowered the little one gently onto a bed of soft moss and leaves that had clearly been prepared for it. The mother stepped closer, her enormous hand extending to touch both the baby and Patrick's hand. The contact was gentle, almost reverent. Patrick froze for a moment, overwhelmed by the trust and gratitude in her eyes. She wasn't just acknowledging him, she was accepting him. The other members of the pride lingered nearby, their large forms moving with quiet grace. They observed, protective but unthreatening, their attention focused entirely on the safety of the baby and the small human who had saved it. Patrick could feel the weight of their watchful presence, a silent promise that as long as he respected this place and its family, he would not be harmed. Patrick took a step back, letting the mother take full care of her child. He felt a profound sense of awe and humility. This wasn't just a reunion, it was a moment of connection between worlds that should never have met, yet had. He realized that trust, care, and empathy transcended species. As the morning sunlight filtered through the trees, casting faint patterns over the mossy ground, Patrick understood something deep and unshakable. He had entered a sacred space, and in doing so, he had witnessed a bond more powerful than fear, more enduring than time. For the first time, he truly saw the pride, not as monsters, but as a family. Patrick stood quietly in the hidden clearing, watching the mother Bigfoot cradle her baby with unmatched tenderness. The pride lingered around him, their massive forms moving silently, as if sensing the fragile balance of trust that had been established. For a moment, He felt like an intruder in a world too powerful and too delicate for human eyes. But at the same time, he felt honored to be here. Then, the leader of the pride moved closer. In its massive hand, it carried a smooth, carved stone, polished over time and engraved with subtle flowing patterns. Patrick's eyes widened. The gesture was deliberate, purposeful. He reached out cautiously, and the leader gently placed the stone into his hands. It was warm from contact, surprisingly heavy, and somehow alive with meaning. Though Patrick couldn't understand the symbols, he sensed immediately that this was more than a gift. It was a recognition of his intentions, an unspoken acknowledgement of the courage and compassion he had shown. The other Bigfoots remained around him, their eyes never leaving his face. Patrick felt the weight of their presence, not threatening, but reverent. They were communicating in a language he could not hear, but could feel, a quiet message carried in the strength of their gaze and the gentle rumble of their throats. They were telling him that he had been accepted, that the baby was safe because of him, and that he had earned a place in this rare, sacred moment. Patrick held the stone close to his chest, understanding that this was a token of trust and respect. The mother, still holding her baby, glanced toward him with a softness in her gaze, as if to say that she too recognized his role in protecting her child. Patrick felt a warmth spread through his chest, a combination of humility, awe, and gratitude. The pride began to step back slowly, creating a clear path for him to leave. Patrick realized that this was their way of letting him go safely, without fear. The baby was now nestled securely with its family, and the bond between human and giants had been solidified. As he took a careful step backward, Patrick whispered softly, "Thank you. I won't forget this." The forest seemed to exhale around him. Sunlight danced through the trees, casting delicate patterns over moss and ferns. Patrick carried the carved stone as a reminder not just of the life he had saved, but of the extraordinary kindness and intelligence of a family hidden deep within the forest. In that moment, he understood that the greatest gift wasn't the stone itself, but the trust he had earned and the bond he would carry forever. Patrick walked slowly back to his cabin, the carved stone heavy in his hand. The forest around him had returned to its familiar rhythm, the soft rustle of leaves, the gentle flow of the creek, and the distant call of birds. Yet something inside him had shifted. The morning's events, the trust he had been shown, and the quiet bond with the Bigfoot pride lingered in his thoughts, vivid and unshakable. Sitting on the steps, he placed the stone beside him and held the memory of the baby, safe in its family, in his mind. Patrick whispered softly to himself, "I thought I saved a life today, but maybe they saved something in me too." He felt a warmth spreading through his chest, a mixture of humility, awe, and quiet joy. The forest was no longer just a backdrop to his life. It had become a teacher. It had shown him courage, patience, and the subtle language of trust that transcended words. Patrick realized that the giants he had feared for so long were not monsters. They were a family, protective, intelligent, and capable of emotions he had only imagined in humans. He sat for a long moment, looking at the stone, the sunlight falling gently across its surface. It was a reminder of the day, of the fragile trust, and of the quiet understanding between worlds that rarely intersected. Patrick felt a sense of peace, a deep knowledge that kindness and compassion could reach across even the widest divides. As he stood and stepped inside the cabin, he glanced back at the forest, whispering one final thought. Out in those woods, I didn't meet monsters. I met a family trying to survive. And they reminded me that trust and care can exist everywhere, even in places we least expect. Patrick placed the stone on his workbench, a lasting symbol of a day that had changed him forever, and settled into the calm rhythm of his life, forever carrying the lesson of the pride in his heart.